Hey guys, and welcome to another episode. Today I'm going to talk to you about the importance of a bleeder screw. Now behind me I've got my buddy's 2007 Dodge Charger SXT, and all the brakes on this car need to be bled. So right now when you touch the brake pedal, the pedal will go about halfway before you get any actual pedal feel. So what that means is when you got your foot on the brake, when you push on, you're going to get nothing, and as soon as you get halfway, that's when the brakes start to work. So why these bleeder screws are so important is these things allow all the air and the old fluid to be flushed out of the system to make your brakes work again. So as soon as you touch the brake pedal, you get pedal engagement. So what I did is I bought a new caliper. Got a new caliper, and we're going to throw this on the car. Only because the bleeder screw on this brake caliper hasn't been opened up in a long time. Now what that means is that the bleeder screw rusted inside the caliper like this, and when I tried to loosen it, thing snapped. So I'm gonna have to take off this caliper and replace it with this loaded one. And in order to get this brake to work properly, I'm gonna have to bleed the system. So what that means is you're gonna have to take the caliper off of the brake line, attach it here onto the new one, and then we're gonna have to pump this full with brake fluid. Now only at that point are you gonna be able to get a good pedal feel, because all the air in the caliper that's in there now is gonna be evacuated with brake fluid. Your brakes on your car, the only way they work is because the brake fluid itself can't compress. So when you press your brake pedal, if you have any air inside the lines, the air is going to compress before the pads actually move and touch the rotors. If you have air in your system, you press the brakes, the calipers are going to be moving and pushing on the brake pedal. So that's why we need to get rid of that air, so as soon as you touch the brakes, you're going to have movement. So you touch the brake pedal and it's going to go in, touch the rotor, and slow you down. So if you can see on the back side of the caliper right here, that's where the bleeder screw should be. So this bleeder screw right here should be able to just thread inside of the brake caliper, but unfortunately it broke and it snapped off.
To remove the brakes, we need to take off two bolts, one found at the top of the bracket and the other one found on the bottom. You can remove both of these by using a 14mm socket. With the top bolt loosened and the bottom one removed, you can slide the caliper up so we can remove both of the brake pads that are found inside the caliper. Slide the caliper back down and then put the bolt back through the bottom bracket. We can then go ahead and remove the two bolts that are found on the back side of the bracket so we can remove the caliper and the bracket from the back side of the knuckle. With those two bolts that are removed, we can suspend the caliper with a hanger just so that the brake line won't flex and get damaged while we remove the brake caliper from the brake line. So because the calipers on the car are already yellow, it'd be a good idea right now to paint them because they're brand new. I'm going to mask up the bleeder screw and the rubber boots, and then I'm going to go ahead and give these calipers a nice coating of yellow paint. Once you let the paint dry on the calipers, take off any of the masking that we put on there earlier. At this stage, we can take the old caliper off of the brake line that's still attached to it, and we can put our new one on the car. So we need to start off by first removing the banjo bolt that's attached to the top side of the brake line. Now, once you take it off, there's going to be a copper washer in between the bolt and the brake line, and then there's going to be another copper washer in between the brake line and the caliper. Now, those are there to make sure that you get a good seal between all three of these components. Take the banjo bolt and brake line off the caliper and set the caliper down on the ground. When you buy a new brake caliper, it should include two copper washers that should be used when you install the new banjo bolt through the brake line into the caliper. The way it should go is that you should put a washer in between the bolt and the brake line, and then another one in between the brake line and the brake caliper. Then feed the banjo bolt through the back side of the caliper and then tighten it up by hand. Once it's tightened up by hand, you can go in afterwards with a wrench and a socket, and you can tighten this up properly. The next step is to feed the two bolts through the bracket onto the back side of the knuckle so that we can secure it down. Now if your bolts are rusty, it's a good time right now to go ahead and remove any rust before you install them back on the car. This is going to make sure that they'll be easy to remove next time that you need to take the brakes off. Now install both of those bolts we just cleaned up through the back side of the knuckle to make sure that the brake bracket is mounted properly. We now need to lift the brake caliper from the bracket so we can install the brake pads into the caliper. Swing the caliper down onto the bracket and then insert the bolt into the slider pin. Now tighten up both bolts on the bottom and top of the bracket, and then it's time to bleed all the brakes. So before you bleed your brakes, make sure that the master cylinder is topped up with brake fluid before we start cracking any of the bleeder screws open. You're then going to need to bleed your brakes. If you can find someone else to help you do this, it's going to be a lot easier than if you were trying to do it by yourself. If you don't know how to bleed your brakes, you can click on the annotation right here, or I'll leave a link in the description that you can click. It's going to show you how to bleed your brakes from beginning to end. So when you're bleeding your brakes, you're essentially removing any of the air that's in the system and you're replacing it with brake fluid. So by opening up the bleeder screw and pumping the brake pedal, you're going to be getting rid of all the air and you're going to get the brake pedal to feel perfect. Don't forget that the brake fluid is corrosive, so if you leave any on your painted caliper, it'll start to eat away at the paint. So spray any areas down with water to neutralize the reaction.
It's very important to put this little rubber boot back onto here so that the actual bleeder screw doesn't rust out and damage. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck and we're going to have to buy another caliper only because the little bleeder screw on the inside snapped off. Now, another way that I find that you can prolong the life of these bleeder screws and your brakes is to check your brakes frequently. Now, what I mean by that is at least once every 6 months. I like to do it before winter and after winter. So what that means is that the brakes are going to be in perfect condition and you're not going to get much corrosion in there. Now, after this step, get the car, put the wheels all back on, get the car, put it back down on the ground, and make sure that before you take the car for a drive, before you move it, pump the brake a couple times just to make sure that you have good pedal feel. If you guys have any questions regarding the video, please post them down in the comments section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.